Today I'm going to share with you how to use the Triad color scheme, a beautiful, harmonious color scheme for your paintings. It's so easy when we just use the color wheel. So let's hop inside and get started right away. So today we're going to be working with the color wheel to find really dynamic, harmonious color schemes. My favorite color wheel is by the Color Wheel Company, and I've gone over this in other videos, how to use all the different possibilities. It is a real tool, and it's like a little color theory course right contained in this little tool. It has all sorts of different things you can do with it, and it has all the different color terminology, what it means, how to use it is all included right on here. So you can look those up on my playlists. So what we do to find harmonious color schemes is flip to the back of this, and it actually says harmonious color schemes, and it explains each one in detail. And how you find them is you look in the center of the color wheel here, and you will see an arrow that points up and down, and that gives you the complementary colors. And the center skinny triangle gives you a split complementary color scheme, which will point at the primary or main color, and then the two split complementary colors in each of the corners. And today we're going to be using a triad color scheme, which is the bigger, wider triangle here. Then there are tetrads, and there's a rectangular tetrad and a square tetrad. And all of those give you harmonious color schemes, and they change every time you move the color wheel. So you can look these up and you can see ones that will show you how these work. But when you have a color wheel, you can actually, move them around, and it makes it a lot easier to find the color schemes you want to work with. So the colors I've chosen today to work with in my triad color scheme are blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, violet. Okay, so we're going to get started with that triad color scheme to create a dynamic, harmonious color scheme. To get started, I just chose a little vase I like the shape of. I'm not really copying it exactly. This is an older one I've had in my studio, but I love its shape. Then I just got some inspiration from some flowers in my garden. I set up a little still life on my paper, and got a little sketch going I'm going to refer to. And then, of course, I have my color wheel, and I'm using the blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, violet colors. And I'm referring to the larger triangle, the 3 corners, to choose my colors. When I'm working with the colors, at the bottom of my palette paper, I have white, gray, and black to mix tints, tones, and shades of all of these colors. So I have a variety, and I'm not just using the pure color as it comes out of the tube. Also, I did mix in additional red and blue to get a more blue-green or a more red-violet. I added a little bit more red to the red-violet I had. I didn't think it was red enough. I added a little bit more blue and green to tweak the colors a little bit. So I did add some additional colors just so that a lot of times, the tube colors aren't just right or as you know, they might be a little bit too cool or a little bit too warm. So I did add a little bit more red to the reddest violet I had and made it a little bit more of a red violet. And with the aqua color I had was a little too green, so I added some blue. Then I added a little bit more of a cooler oceany green until I was happy with that color. And that's all fine to do. I mean, you want to be happy with the colors and have them be as close to your vision as possible. You know, and there's always going to be a little bit of a range. But once you're happy with that, you know, mixture that you've come up with, you know, you're going to want to stay kind of in there. And you can see that these colors are already, you know, very dynamics next to each other, and I'm happy to use them next to each other. I think they're looking really interesting. I'm also, when I'm making the leaves and things, I'm mixing a little bit of the yellow and the green together to get some variation in my foliage, and I think that that looks really good, because I do like to vary my colors. I don't like anything to look too flat or uninteresting, so I do like to vary things up a little bit, but it's still staying true to the colors that we're working with in that triad color scheme. You'll also notice in the center of my palette I have two whites, and in the very center I have a little bit of matte medium. That's just there for flow, and if I feel like I need a little extra flow in the colors I'm mixing up, I just mix in a little bit of the matte medium, and that just adds a little bit more flow. If you add water to your acrylic paint and it's too thin, it can actually degrade your paint, and it's not good for acrylic paint. You're really supposed to thin with the mediums. So you can use flow medium. I like to use acrylic medium, and I prefer the matte medium. You can also use gloss medium, but this is very similar to the paint itself without the pigment. So it's very conducive to adding flow. You can create glazes with it, but in this case I'm just adding a little bit to add some additional flow. It will increase the drying time just slightly, but only if you add a lot of it, you know, and I'm just adding a small amount. Now I'm creating a very light tint of the blue-green color to create my vase, just because I want it to read as a white vase, but I think that white always has a color, so I've decided to use the very, very pale aqua blue and then give it some warm highlights with a very pale yellow. And I think I also decided that I would make a very pale yellow tint with white and use that on the interior of the vase. So I'm finishing additional details with the blue green tint, and then I begin to mix up a tint using the yellow orange and a little bit of white for the interior of the vase. I went for a richer, a little deeper, richer tone for the interior part, just to give it a little bit more depth and showing the interior, and just a little creamier color to show that it was the inside of the pot. Now that I have the main part of the painting finished using the Triad, I'm going to bring in one more color for the background. So I'm going to go, since we were using blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, violet, I'm using blue, green as my main color. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to take one more color. I'm going to go back into the primary red, which is a split complementary color to the blue-green, and I'm going to use primarily tints of the red. I haven't decided if I'm going to make any tones or shades, but primarily I'm going to be using tints of this primary red color in the cooler tones. Okay. So here I'm mixing up like a primary magenta color with the white, and I'm going into the background with that, and probably a medium color, I guess, but it is a tint. I didn't add gray or black. I decided just to go with the tints, and you'll already see how the colors start to vibrate because we're using a split complementary to that blue-green color. And the blue-green, even though we've made a tint of it, it is still going to be very harmonious, and it is going to vibrate with it because it is a split complementary color. And this is how we can create these really fun, harmonious, and dynamic color schemes really quite easily if we just learn to use a very simple tool like the color wheel. So I'm kind of building up a little bit of a layer here. I mean, this is just a very short study, a very short and fun study, but I still want to get some mark making in here. I want to use dynamic brush strokes and build up some mark making as I'm putting down this layer. I want to give myself a little bit of fun marks and things as I'm going along and adding this background in. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just adding some marks and lines, and I'm trying to keep my brush strokes really fresh and interesting as I add the first part of the background in here. So I'm just creating a little bit of a shadow area, and then I go in and create a very light tint for the rest of the background, the top part of the background. And I want to get in that top part with a very light tint, lighter than the bottom, to give it a lighter feel on top. And so I mixed quite a bit of white into the next portion of this painting. I did start a second little palette sheet, and I used fresh white because I didn't want any of the other colors to get into that part of the background. I just didn't want any mixing or accidental mixing of any of those colors because I just didn't want any kind of muddy colors. I wanted all my colors to be really pure. And because I had so many tiny little places on top and little areas to get around, I do end up flipping the painting, which I do sometimes. I like to flip it over, and then I can get inside all those little tiny places a lot easier without having to make my brush strokes halted or stifled, because I really like a lot of activity in the brush strokes because it gives more energy to a painting if you can paint more freely. So I like to have energetic brush strokes and lots of energy put into the brush work in my paintings. So sometimes just doing something as simple as flipping the painting over makes it easier to get in there, and you're able to paint in a more free way. As you add more and more of the split complementary color to the triad color scheme, you can really see how these color interactions start to work together. You'll see the colors all singing and vibrating, and it makes such a huge difference than when you're just picking randomly. It makes all the difference, if you're looking for a really vibrant, dynamic way to bring more life to your paintings through color. I'll be adding a purchase link to where you can purchase this color wheel in the description box below. It's very affordable at under $10 and available widely. I just continue to build those layers in the background, and then when I've got that finished, I really like to go through and add additional mark making, just little details to bring some more interest into the painting. Here I'm just adding some extra color here and there, and just popping in little details and little touch-ups here and there. Just little finish details. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like, share, and subscribe to my channel because it really does help the channel grow, and I do appreciate it so much. Thanks for being here, and please come again soon. At the very end of the painting, I just go through and add additional touch-ups, a little bit of extra mark making, but it is the hardest thing to know when to stop when you're painting. Thank you so much for being here. Please hit like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It really helps my channel grow, and I do appreciate it so much. Thanks for being here, and please come again soon.